Public Safety Committee. Roll call, please.
Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Ms. Baker. Here. Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Mr. Brady. Mr. Brady is absent. Ms. Conwell. Ms. Conwell is absent. There is a quorum.
Thank you. Public comment?
Yes, Reverend Pinckney.
Public safety.
Happy New
And I
Year.
want to thank you all for seeing to it that I have my grandchildren back. Please tell your dad I said hello to Mr. Tuma.
I will.
Okay. And then I did try to reach out to him, but I missed him. For resolution, both of the resolutions, of course, briefly, 2018 0007, I would like to have some more clarity on the new Justice Center project. We can, as preachers, preach to people and tell them what's right and what's wrong. And also in legislation, we can draft things up. But people need to know the severity of this judicial process. And as you are making this resolution for the owners and the representative services in connection with the new Justice Center complex, and even the one that's in existence now, people need to be more aware and clear of the circumstances of the law. I know I've come to you multiple times about massive incarceration and recidivism and some other things, but we in the faith community need some more clarity on what is truly taking place. We want some more step-by-step processes. I don't know what you went through to help me get my grandchildren back, but I know you went through some things. And people need to know seriously how serious the law really is. And as you build the complex, I would like for you to speak more openly and let the public know what you need. We who observe and respect the law so it can be done decently and in order. Because some believe that this is a lawless time, but it really is not. And as you build a new system and a new process, Councilman Germana made some very valid points when you were talking about this, about the building and the infrastructure not built as it should be. And even in the juvenile center, people messing with the sprinklers. But we in the faith community work together with legislation so that people will know, and we need some more clarity of these decisions. For the Rainbow's Babies and Children's Hospital, the Juvenile Court Detention Center, I would like for you to pay some more attention to the fact that when the juveniles are in these detention centers, a lot of them are experimented on with psychotropic medications for correction, and they're not getting the proper medical care that they should be receiving. And many times the adults, the parents of these children are not implemented in the healing process. And the system is kind of messed up in a way, for lack of better terms, in the way that family members really don't have access for the healing process to work through Rainbow's Babies and Children, Cleveland Clinic, and all the other hospitals. And I would ask that you would please take these matters into advisement as you do begin in this new year and as we work towards this one world system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone further?
No one else has signed in.
Okay,
And also like the record to reflect that Councilman Miller is in attendance.
right. And welcome, Mr. Miller, as always. Happy New Year. In your packet, you have the minutes of December 5th. If they're in order, I'll accept the motion.
So move. So move.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Thank you. There's been a request that juvenile go first, and when Ms. Lippman shows up, we like to deliver. Ms. Lippman, Happy New Year. Come on up here.
Resolution number 2018-0012, making an award on requisition number 38826 to University Hospital's Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital in the amount not to exceed $2,400,000 for health care and management services at the Juvenile Court Detention Center for the period 1/1/2018 through 12/31/2019.
Thank you. Had I known it would have been this cold, I would have called it off, but we're Cossacks, so we got through it.
We're tough Clevelanders, so.
Yeah, right. So
This is your
anyhow,
sleep
welcome. Good seeing you yet again.
Good seeing you.
And what can you tell us about this item?
Sure. Karen Lippman with Juvenile Court, and I just want to wish everyone a Happy New Year as well. So juvenile court did an RFQ process for medical services in the detention center. And we had two proposals that came back, and the court decided to go with University Hospitals Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital as the selected vendor for these services in the detention center. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of information that sort of went into our decision-making process. The first thing I wanted to let everyone on the council know that the RFQ process was very, very specific as to the services we needed, the number of registered nurses, doctor hours, everything else, and was very, very specific in those requirements in the detention center, so that when the responses came back, we had two equal products that we could really weigh back and forth and make a decision on. We really liked the proposal from University Hospitals. We found that the cost savings was going to be about $400,000 over what we received from the other vendor. And actually, the cost savings in year 2 actually goes up a little bit based on some training costs that exist only in year 1. The other thing that we really liked about going with Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital was the fact that the vast majority of the youth that are in the detention center are from the east side of Cleveland, and we really do want to have that continuity of care so that when kids get out of the detention center, that we not only can continue with whatever care that they do get in the detention center, but we also can sort of foster an environment of good health care and good preventative care with these kids and also with their families. We also considered sort of some more pragmatic kind of things as far as overtime of detention officers. So when there is an emergency and a youth needs to be taken to the emergency room, you need to have 2 detention officers that go with them. And as you can probably guess, when you go to the emergency room, there's often a lot of downtime where you're sitting and waiting if it's not a critical issue. And we have a lot of overtime that exists because we've got detention officers that are sitting in the emergency room with these youth. By utilizing the emergency room at UH and at Rainbow, we actually have an ability where we can ferry out if there's a shift change, the new detention officer, and bring the other one back, so that we don't have people that are just sitting in the emergency room and racking up overtime hours. So that would be a huge cost savings for the court. And lastly, going with sort of the premier children's hospital in this region was extremely attractive to the court, as well as the emergency room being sort of the level 1 trauma center for pediatrics in the region. So that was sort of our decision-making process. I do have 2 representatives from UH here if there's any more detailed questions about sort of their vision or what they're looking for in working with us. And that's all I got.
Thank you. And that was an RFQ?
It was
process?
an RFQ, yes.
Okay. And transferring the prisoners from the juvenile detention to the hospital isn't done by the sheriff?
No, it's done by the court, unless, of course, it's an emergency and we call EMS. But no, it's done by the court.
And you have vehicles and everything?
We have secure vans. for
And the
transport.
detention employees are trained to move?
We have people that are well, we have drivers, and then we also, yes, we do have, that's part of the detention officers' training is being able to move and transport youth.
And you used to do that with Metro? Transfer to Metro?
We used to transfer them from 93rd and Quincy over to Metro if they needed to go to the emergency room.
Okay, all right. Any questions? Mr. Miller?
So I gather is Metro the current provider?
Metro is the current provider.
And were they the second bidder in this process?
They were the second bidder in the process.
And what portion of the services do you expect are going to be provided at the juvenile detention center, and what portion of the services will be provided at UH?
So the way we look at the contract is sort of divided into three sections. So we have one section which we call sort of the doctors or the physicians, and that's just sort of the piece where we have either a physician and/or a physician assistant who comes in to provide that level of care for youth. The second portion is what we call nursing. So we have an RN who's on staff, who's there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then that's sort of supplemented with some LPNs or other RNs during the times when either the clinic is open to take kids' issues and problems, or when they're dispensing meds or whatever. But there's always a nurse there, and then the doctors are always on call so that we can respond to them. And then the last part of the contract is what we sort of call, for lack of anything else, is clinic, and that's for all of those out of the detention center doctor visits or emergency room visits. So stuff and that can't be handled within the detention center. So the vast majority of the contract is that nursing part of the contract, because you've got nursing staff 24 hours, 7 days a week. The doctor portion is really the second most expensive or largest part of the contract. Right now we have between the doctors and physician assistants, that's 20 hours a week. And then that does flex a little bit if there's a greater need. And then the last piece, which is sort of really depending on need, is that what we call clinic piece. And then sort of part of that clinic piece, which I didn't mention, is sort of a lab piece. And this is for any kind of initial labs that need to be done as youth are brought into the detention center. And that's just sort of checking for any kind of communicable diseases and anything else. When you're bringing somebody into sort of that kind of environment, you want to check for that, as well as any kind of other testing that needs to be done. Does that answer your question?
Pharmacy, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, and it's new to me, so if I could just ask a couple.
Absolutely.
All right. So outside of it sounds like emergency care, immediate care, maybe sickness or something, do your management services or health care go beyond that? Is there any psychological care, drug addiction care? I mean, what is the scope of work that's given to those that are coming from the detention center?
Okay, so there is mental health services in the detention center, but that's not provided through this contract.
Okay.
That's provided through a separate contract that is actually held by the Adams Board,
Okay.
that is provided for, and I believe the vendor is Applewood, who provides those services, and they are located in the detention center as well.
Okay.
So that being said, and they do have a psychiatrist who comes in to see youth as needed. So there is a little bit of interplay between the two, especially when a psychiatrist would be prescribing any kind of medication that the medical staff then would have to be dispensing. So there is some kind of interplay between the two.
Okay.
But this contract only speaks to sort of medical services.
Okay.
So the emergency room care is sort of self-explanatory. If somebody gets hurt while they're in the detention center, generally that sort of is in two camps. If I could sort of boil it down, one is a kid either playing sports or something else falls and gets hurt and they need to go out to have it looked at. We do have a new service that does provide sort of x-rays and some scanning called MobileX that actually is done there, so we don't have to transport the youth. But any other kind of diagnostic procedure that would have to be done in a hospital or clinic setting that
Right.
we don't have. And then the other type of injury that would cause a youth to go to the emergency room would be any fighting or injury that would occur due to that kind of a need. And I don't remember, was there another part of your question? I can't
Is there,
remember.
it sounds like you react to what is needed. Is there any well care or?
Oh, okay, yeah.
type-
So there are some youth that come into the detention center who have existing medical needs, whether they have an injury that happened prior to them coming to the detention center that needs some kind of some kind of wound that needs to be dressed or taken care of.
Right.
Or it needs they have something that needs that follow-up care where you have to go back for a check if that has to be done outside. But like I said, part of, I know what the court's vision and I believe UH's vision is to sort of follow up with those youth and then by extension, their families in the community. Because one of the things that we find with a lot of these youth is many of them have never even seen a doctor before. They maybe don't have any kind of medical history, and they just don't have that in their backgrounds. And this is a wonderful, if you will, opportunity to sort of get them sort of in sort of a preventative care and get them in to see a doctor and then by extension, their families as well. So that piece is there as well. And I don't know if UH, and we talked about this just a little bit, but about talking about any kind of, although we do this in the detention center sometimes, is sort of just things like hygiene and sort of good health, whether it's eating, whether it's exercise, and those kinds of things which go to sort of overall wellness and preventative care. And that's something certainly that we have done in the detention center through outside vendors, and we certainly would work with the UH in providing that as well. As far as addiction, I know that we do sometimes do sort of more preventative, don't get involved in drugs and alcohol kind of things. Any youth that comes in with those needs, that would be something that I think would be provided more from mental health, substance abuse. Yes.
Okay. Good, that was very thorough, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks.
They don't do telemedicine like we have at
I'm sorry, they don't do
telemedicine?
telemedicine?
No, we are.
You gotta come up and introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you for the question. I'm Dr. Andrew Hertz from Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital. I'm Vice President, oversees our community care. And yes, we have telemedicine capabilities that we have used in other types of locations, and we would like to use it once we get into the detention center, if we can figure out technologically how to do that.
So we have that through Metro at the main jail, and that has been a rousing success. And also, doctor, with this, do we have break on medications on prescriptions pharmacy?
So the court has a separate contract with someone to provide the medications for youth. I don't know, and I'm not the right person to talk about but it has to do with the license as far as providing those medications.
We will dispense the medications.
But they can't get them, I suppose, or you have to have a pharmacy license?
We were applying for one, but we'll do whatever is needed to
Right.
do in order to dispense the medications. But we'll certainly oversee the dispensing and prescribing of medications that need to be done.
There's a cost savings, again, through Metro, and it took a long process to do it. Is it the 501B or 401B?
340B, and you do get pharmacy
340B.
discounts, and we would be using, we've already spoken with our in-house pharmacy, which gets the 340B discounts.
Right, and the cost savings is astronomical, and we've noticed that over there. So, are there any further questions? Well, doctor, I've always said it, and my two children were through Rainbow, and if you're looking for angels on earth, I think you start there first. So, it's a wonderful, wonderful place for children that are in need, and I've spoken with everybody involved here, and I think everyone's okay with this. So I would assume you would like to move this forward?
Absolutely.
Okay. If everyone's okay, I'll take a motion to move 2018-0012 to the full council under emergency suspension as their first reading.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We look forward to working with the court.
Resolution number 2018-0007, making an award on requisition number 40411 to Project Management Consultants in the amount not to exceed $800,000 for owner's representative services in connection with the Justice Center Complex Project for the period 2/1/2018 through 1/31/2020.
Mr. Dever.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Public Safety and Justice Affairs Committee. Michael Dever with Department of Public Works, along with Nicole English, our planning administrator for the department. We're here today on item 2018-007, a resolution for to award a contract to the project management consultant group for $800,000. Nicole is going to speak on that process and how we came to it, but I guess I'd like to try and set the table of where we are right now and how we came to this point and why we're requesting this contract at this time. As many of you are aware, the Justice Center complex back in 2012 and 13, the county decided to take an effort to do an assessment of the Justice Center complex. We ended up contracting with Osborne Engineering and K2M Design Consultants to complete a facility condition assessment report. The intent was to get a clear understanding of the existing condition of the Justice Center physical assets and evaluate the needs of the operations at the facility. The overall primary result that concluded that many of the physical components were or soon reach the end of their life cycle expectancy. At the same time, as part of that report, there was a planning document that was prepared that basically came up with 8 different options for that current location of varying scale and cost to renovate that facility. From that step, back in much discussion had taken place. And in 2016, the county initiated workshops and visioning sessions with participants from the county, the city courts, and all the stakeholders over at the complex. These sessions reviewed a number of best practices gleaned from national trends and identified local opportunities and challenges within and without the limitation posed by the current physical Justice Center facility. Those workshops yielded a 2017 agreement among many of the Justice Center stakeholders on a set of guiding principles to adhere to when contemplating the next steps of the Justice Center. Those guiding principles included process, cost control, operations, dignity, security, access to justice, flexibility, and integration. Finally, in March of this year, the city of, actually it was earlier than March of this year, the city of Cleveland made note that they were leaving their police facility. And obviously the county became very aggressive and sought to purchase that. And in October of this year, the county closed on the purchase, or in the fall of this year, the county closed on the purchase of the police facility, therefore gaining control of the entire site of the Justice Center complex. What was included with that, gaining control of that, now we had a clear path, I guess, to utilize those options that came up in the earlier study, or at the same time look to other options that possibly the Justice Center may go to another location somewhere else in the downtown vicinity. Nothing has been determined in results of that, but what was decided is that we needed to move forward with some assistance to lead us through that discussion with the stakeholders. And that's what brings us here today with this owner's representative contract. We went through a pretty lengthy process that started back in June, and now we are prepared to present to you the recommended candidate for that. So I'm going to have Nicole step up. I don't know if anyone has any questions right now on the process that brought us to here on those earlier studies. Anyone? We good? Okay. Thank you. Nicole.
Thanks. Nicole English with Public Works. So we're presenting a contract with PMC in the not to exceed amount of $800,000 starting February 1st till January 31st of 2020. There was 38 RFQs pulled. This was a qualification-based selection. 4 proposals were submitted for review. We interviewed 3 of the top teams, and we're recommending the number 1 candidate. There was a mixture of county staff and court staff on the selection committee. It was rather big, actually, 12 people that sat on that committee and interviewed the firms and made the recommendation to move forward. The scope of the work is included in the contract, and essentially it's an owner's rep to get us from the start of even identifying who the stakeholders are going to be for each of the groups and walking us through programming, any additional consultants that we might need to hire to help us make these decisions, and then get us all the way through when we decide how to move forward with a project. They would also assist. Similar to how we use them on the hotel project, they came in early on and sat with us all the way through. This piece of the contract gets us to the point of selecting a contractor because we don't know what we're doing yet, so they couldn't necessarily propose on that phase 2 of overseeing the work until we know what the scope of the work is. But this gets us all the way to that point. If you have any questions, we can take them.
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Just learning about this, this is a 3-year then? It's going to take 3 years from, I guess, what do we have, February 1st, so in another couple of weeks?
Just a 2-year,
to get to
18, full of all of
All of
18 and all of
18.
19, essentially ending at the end of January of 20. So.
Oh, end of January 20, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, okay, 2 year. And
And
that will
it's-
get us to the contractor's stage.
To the idea is really within 12 months we should have a good feel for what we need to do. It's just until you get that committee set and see how fast paced we can move and make decisions, we wanted to be sure we didn't run out of time on the contract. But the hope is this is really about a 12-month process
Okay.
to get us to a recommendation of what to do next.
All right, that's good to know, thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Can you tell me what the primary questions are that you're hoping to answer through this process?
I think the key is that early on, we have to work with the programmers to understand what space we're gonna need, what people will accept as far as space. We know the condition of the current building, so we do have that from the previous study, but if the idea is a combination of, fix what we have, build some new or build new, we have to understand what that space should be and how it's laid out, whether it's on the current footprint or not. Now with the addition of the Cleveland Police Headquarters, that was never contemplated in the initial study, so that needs to be worked into the fold as well. And then who goes where and who goes in? There's ancillary departments that don't sit in the Justice Center right now that may want to be part of a new Justice Center, whether they're in Courthouse Square or the functions of the Marion Building we're bringing over. So who's coming in to the fold and who can work together and which makes sense.
Do you expect to have a decision on whether you're using the existing facility or a new site by the end of this process?
I think our hope is by the end of this calendar year, there's a direction, I think, and an opinion forming of which direction we should go, and that steering committee should be able to assist in that. So, yeah, by the end of this process, definitely.
Is part of the process also to determine how many jail spaces you're going to need?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, currently, I think we house roughly just under 2,000 inmates a day, and I think they're looking at the possibility, obviously, these regional jails and the additional jail services that are starting to be provided by the county. So that would be an active part of this discussion. What are those long-range plans, and does it fit into? We want to make sure we accommodate for that. We don't need to be coming back looking for changes within 5 or 10 years. But there should be some flexibility also. I mean, we should have flexibility within whatever facility we go, because things change, technology changes, and the use changes of a facility, and we should prepare ourselves for for that possibility.
Mr. Chairman, on that point, my concern is that if you build a lot of jail spaces, we're going to use them. I know that in Summit County, they have a pre-trial release program, and they're incarcerating way fewer people per capita than we are. It's been estimated that we could save 400 or 500 spaces just with an effective pre-trial release program. Currently, about 60% of the people in the county jail are pre-sentencing, as opposed to serving sentences that have already been given, and I think that if we need to think in terms of a much more aggressive approach to this and other forms of diversion. If we build for a capacity that assumes a very strong diversion program, well, we'll find a way to make it work. But if we don't, and we build for a large number of spaces, well, then the impetus to really work hard on diversion won't be there, and we'll end up using all those spaces and spending a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a very valid point, and I would say through this discussion or this entire next year here, that is going to be a well-discussed topic, and that's why I don't want to put forward what I think it's going to be in the future. I think that this group collectively, plus experts that are going to have to assist us in making that determination of what this is going to be in the future. So it's premature, and I probably am mistaken for saying that at the beginning. It's premature to say what is it going to look like in the future. But right now, what we do know is that the current facility, many of the systems within the facility and components of the facility are reaching the end of their useful life. That's not all of them, but many of them are. And we're going to have to, there's going to be some type of significant capital expenditure, unfortunately, by the county in the very near future. And this is to help us try and make that decision collectively.
Yes, I agree. That is something that we know at this point. Thank you.
The other point to make just is that there's going to be a steering committee, but it's also going to be fed with stakeholder groups. So while there's one steering committee that will sort of make the big decisions, there will be several stakeholder groups that will address all these different topics that will feed up to the steering committee. So the idea is to get input from lots of different people that use the building and are in and around the system. So we're hoping that these project management consultants will be able to lead this big group and gather as much info as they can, plus the outside experts.
And any expenditures outside is going to be coming before this council for review and discussion. So the stakeholder group is really key. I mean, and there will be representation from council on that stakeholder, that steering committee, which we think is going to be made up of in excess of a dozen people and groups that are part of that facility now. So we're trying to put we're trying to develop that group as it is right now, and then we hope to have information going out within the next 2 weeks here to the respective stakeholders to make sure we get the proper appointments to that committee, and so we can get up and start running with this as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What does this specific proposed vendor bring in terms of expertise as compared to some of the other vendors that were not selected in the process?
So we felt they were very strong on their facilitating the process and the different development and project delivery methods. So they have strength in running design build projects, selecting the consultants. They have their sub-consultant on their team has a strong Justice Center background. Kitchell is their name, and they they came to the interview as well as a big portion of the team that we thought was a strength. They have a lot of cost estimating data, that they had the biggest database in the country to assist us with budgeting for the future. And we still feel that we're going to need a programming expert, which all of the teams had said we would need an outside programming expert to come in and work directly for the county, opposed to work for the owner's rep to help us with the programming. But as far as leading the facilitation of this group, it's going to be a difficult path. You know, we think with the steering committee, just getting consensus and building consensus. So we felt that they were very strong in leading these efforts. And actually, one of the other teams that came in that we did think was strong had used PMC to do their facilitating on another project because they couldn't get it done.
As far as the steering committee, when do you anticipate that being put in place?
We have started a draft list. We wanted to get this contract in place so PMC could also help us make a final decision on it, and we're sending that out hopefully within the next few weeks as far as nominations and making sure we have the right people.
And what's been like the I don't know if the right word is, but what's been the attitude of the folks who actually work in the building that you've been dealing with, the judges or administrative judges there and such?
Well, we feel like there's positive feedback on it. I mean, once again, we brought some of the stakeholders involved in the selection from the Common Pleas Court, from the Municipal Court. Prosecutor's Office was involved in the selection. So everybody understands, once again, I'll go back to it, is that the physical building itself is going to need some significant repair. And so we need to start this step first. But I have not gotten any significant or any negative feedback, should I say. But we have to start a process, and, you know, pulling a lot of different stakeholders together, there's going to be differing opinion. But if we all get the information, and if we're missing something, hopefully those stakeholders can say, you're missing something here. It needs to be brought into the discussion. That will keep us all together. The key piece to this also is cost. You know, from the earlier study, we saw the cost figures at the low end was $300 million to repair the facility. That was just as is. And then we had other figures that were in the range of $600, $700 million. That's staggering numbers. That so you need to start it right from the very beginning, and we think we're going down the path the right way right now.
How much do you expect the other vendor, mentioned that you guys discussed the cost, to bring in that other individual to assess the programmer, I think it was?
Right, the judicial planning piece of this. We're not sure yet. It may be in the range of, it's hard for me to say, but I would think it's close to $500,000.
Okay.
And depending on who all we're looking at bringing in, the bigger the footprint of people who want to be looked at operationally, of course, that would be in line with the contract.
Real last question. What do you say to, you know, individuals who say, you know, what do you need outside experts to be doing this job? What's your, you know, response? This is a lot of money, obviously, just to bring people in to give opinions. So what do you say to the person out there who says, boy, this is an awful lot of money for a project, just to have someone give an opinion about? What's your reply to that?
Well, you know, this is going to be the largest expenditure in the county. I think it may be the largest one that this county is probably going to face. I would say that we need a clear expert opinion to help direct us as a group, because there is a lot of, as you know, there's different stakeholders and political leaders out there that are going to want a voice in this, and our hope is that they will be included as part of this steering committee. That you know, I guess it's hard for me to wrap my. You just need everyone's input on this, and if we don't do it right at the get-go here, you're going to stumble and fall, and we don't have a consensus, and then later on, we may decide, let's just rebuild the Justice Center. We'll spend $300 million. And then we find out 5-8 years later that there is significant change in how courts, function, and we're not prepared for it. And we've gone down a path here of putting money not where it should have gone. So I hope that's clear enough.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sir.
Just to comment on that point, I received a call from a constituent urging me to vote against this contract and saying that it's a waste of money and we don't need to spend $800,000 on consultants and we can figure out on our own how to handle the Justice Center. But I have to say that I strongly disagree. I think the success that we had with the administration, the hotel, and the convention center, where we built these projects on time and under budget, very complex projects. I think the benefits of the consulting and planning work were evident on those projects, and also in the same way with the Juvenile Justice Center, we saw what happened when we had a process that was not tightly controlled and where the stakeholders drove the process without some reining in and control from the county's leadership, and so I think if this process is done right, the process will save us many times over the money that we're spending on it. So I'm a yes on this, and I think you're on the right track.
Appreciate that, Councilman Miller.
Yes, ma'am.
I would agree. I think good planning at the beginning can save an awful lot of time and money and mistakes later on. The project management, the PMC, have you done work with them before? What large facilities have they done for us? I don't know anything about them.
Sure. They did work with us on the hotel. They were selected as our owner's rep for that. They stepped in to help at the end of the convention center. They weren't involved early on when it was through the commissioners, but they did come on towards the end to lead the way. So they were successful on those projects. We did open it up for RFQ because we wanted to see what else was out there, and they still were selected as the most qualified. I mean, we did a pretty detailed selection process, but we were happy with the results. And I think we feel we do a good job in Public Works of delivering projects. However, we aren't experts at redesigning a whole justice center or designing a hotel. So we saw that they really were a value add to help our staff. We still had pieces that we needed to do on our front, but they really walked us through. And the other nice part is that they can ramp up and down as needed. You know, we can't necessarily hire 10 people right now and then say that we don't need you in 2 years to do this work. So that was also beneficial that they added to our staff, when we needed them the most, and they were able to pull in their folks. So we saw that it was a value add on our side, and we think we got a superior product because of it.
Good. It's good to know that you have that experience with them. It's a not to exceed. Is there a minimum that they will work for?
No, it is task-based, so we have fees for each of the tasks. So if for some reason we decide not to do a certain task or instead do a different task, we have that defined in there. So it's anticipated if you add all the tasks that we have in their scope, it would not exceed the 800,000. Actually, 750 is their fees, 50,000 is reimbursable expenses, so that may not be used all the way. But we could cut out tasks. But as far as what we've identified now, we think this is, the max that it would be.
All right. Thank you.
Except for the 500,000 more.
Once again, our intent is to come back to you to explain specifically about what the role of that judicial planning process, programming process would be.
See, that's the problem I always have with these, is not that they're hidden costs, but they're costs that are coming down the road. So the 800,000 isn't all in, it's just a beginning. And I think that's where some of these projects tend to jump off the rails pretty quickly. Just listening with, you're gonna have a group of 12 people. I can tell you right now, be prepared to spend $300 million on a patch of something that's gonna fall down in 10 years. Far be it from me to say that the federal government does anything well, but the one thing that they do well is they build courthouses. And the reason that they do that well, and you don't read about stories about overcost and things like that, and judges arguing and administrators trying to get bigger offices and all that, is they have one person in the United States of America who makes all the decisions. And when they did our building here, they flew all the judges and their personnel to DC, put them in a room, and told them, by the gentleman, I'm the boss. You may have a lifetime position. This is what I do. I represent the president. Now have a nice day. And that's exactly what happened. And you didn't hear any arguing or any complaining. They had their input, but it wasn't listened to because this person did this for a living. How we don't follow that, I don't know. I think we're going down a multi-million-dollar trail. To Mr. Miller's point, courts are going to have a major change in the next 10 years, in my opinion. The Chief Justice is doing a review of all the courts in Ohio. I think all the courts in Ohio are going to look differently. I think the jails will look differently because of release programs that Mr. Miller talks about. But again, that's not us. That's incumbent on the judges to implement such changes. And if those changes don't come, then we're going to have to build a bigger jail. So there's a lot to be done here that I think can be made a lot simpler by having one person either be praised or take the hit, and we're not doing it. So welcome to Cuyahoga County. I'm afraid that we're going down that wrong path. And when I heard the 500,000 extra, 800,000 here, it's, I don't know. But both were scored at 83, both project management consultants and Hill International. What was the difference?
So they scored that out of the submittal of just their paper proposal. Then when we brought them in for the interview, the difference, we thought Hill had somewhat of a mixture. They had quite a few consultants on their team. It wasn't clear who was going to be leading what part. We didn't think they were going to have a consolidated effort. They were the ones who had said they brought PMC in to do their facilitating on another justice project, the Franklin County project, because they needed someone to somewhat lead that charge. So that made us a little nervous, just because we think that's going to be one of our challenges, is facilitating these groups.
He has built a new justice center,
Correct.
or they're in the process?
They're in the process.
Yeah, they
It's
rehabbed
multi-year.
some.
Rehab and a few other things going on down there.
And how big is their oversight committee?
I'm not sure we could get that information.
Yeah, I
though.
think we need to get that.
Yeah.
And I tell you, I think as we formulate this committee, you better get people with skin in the game. Because you have problems over in the Justice Center, and it's very clear who the problem children are, and it's not the county. And if you're gonna have people making decisions and swaying votes, and then at the end, they back out, where are we? So there should be an upfront agreement if we're gonna be inviting the outsiders in. It didn't work in the Justice Center. I could say it, you can't, but you know it's true, and I know it's true. And so anyhow, and this has been ready for almost 4 months, over 4 months. What was the holdup? Was August this was chosen, or?
They were, the selection date was August 15th, and then the interview date, I don't have that on, but I feel like it was a week or two later. So we were working on the scope and the costs with PMC, and then coming to an agreement. So we worked through some iterations of what they were going to do and what the scope would look like. Again, the other sub-consultant, Kitchell, that they needed input from them as far as where they thought they were going to be best suited to help. So it was just a matter of getting the scope. We did have it ready shortly before the holidays, but again, with everybody in and out, to get it on the agenda.
Excuse me.
Here we are now.
And PMC is still in control of that walkway tunnel? Are they still involved with that? Or is that entirely?
On the outskirt, I mean, yes, they're providing review of invoicing and that kind of thing, but Turner's completing the work right now.
What's the
for us.
problem over there?
It's you can walk through it. It's just the inside now that we're finalizing. Our biggest problem was the utilities in the road. They wouldn't move quick enough. That was not a priority to them. They were finishing Public Square, and we couldn't really do anything until they got out of our way.
Okay. Anybody have any further questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as far as timing goes, so what's the next major step in this process? I mean, you want to put together a steering committee. I want to make sure that, throughout this process, council is apprised as to what's happening, so we're not hit with any major surprises, both financially or procedurally. So what's the next major step here?
So after the contract is, council gives authority to move forward with the contract, we'll finalize it. We are going to be sending correspondence out to those those stakeholder groups to participate and to identify who's going to be sitting on the steering committee. Like I had mentioned, council will have representation on this steering committee also. Then I think we'll start drafting, with PMC's help, the planning, programming, consulting RFQ, and our hope is to get that out. That'll go in tandem with some of the work that PMC is going to do here. But I don't have any objections, even though the steering committee is meeting and discussing things, I don't have any objections of coming back to the council and maybe providing brief updates on how the whole process, like I said, this next year here, I think it's, by the end of the year, the hope is that we have maybe at least a decision. Are we going to stay at the current site and rebuild there, or are we going to do something different?
And then just along with what my colleague was discussing with the stakeholders, obviously there's a lot of people involved affecting various individuals for a variety of reasons. So, who came up with the figure of 12 members? Is that just a number that's kind of out there, or I'm just concerned with that's a large number of people to agree on anything. You can ask us up here, but
Sure. And that's part of the reasons, bringing an outside group in that knows how to shepherd a large group like this. There's going to be people on this on the overall steering committee that aren't going to be supportive of certain things, and
who might they be?
I'm not sure. I think whenever you bring a large
We're
group,
among friends here.
whenever you bring a large
I
group
don't think
together like
anything's
that,
being,
you do not
nothing's
get
going on. There's no
consensus.
refund.
But the number hasn't been finalized. 12 to 15, I think, is the number we're trying to look towards. Okay.
yeah, I just think you have to be cautious with the number of people that are invited to the table, because a lot of people have a lot of reasons for wanting to be involved in
Sure.
this.
So,
We want to make sure that they're for the right reasons. So.
Right. So Colleen Brown from the prosecutor's office is here today, and it's always great to see Colleen. But that would be one of the stakeholder groups that are there. Obviously, the Common Pleas Court. You have the municipal court that is roughly in 30% of the facility. The sheriff's office, 50% of the facility is made up of the sheriff's office. Clerk of courts, Muni clerk of courts is involved in there. The housing court, which continues to expand, is one group. Based on the earlier study, they need more space. They're becoming that much more active in the community. So those are the likes of the groups that are going to be participating in it. Okay?
That committee gets big pretty quickly, just taking basic tenets over there. So, okay, just as long as there's an awareness out there, about the scope of that group. So, thank you.
In hearing some of the dialogue, it seems that this is, a justice center is different than any other building and hotels or, so does the PMS or PMC, I'm sorry, have that expertise? Or is there someone out there that has done justice centers before that are complex, that say to those that want something that doesn't fit within the scope of what we think is what should be done, say, nope, that can't be done, and they're an outside service and they can take the grief and this is the way it's going to be done? Is there that kind of leadership within the project management consultants that can say, I've done this before, that doesn't work that way, and we have to proceed down this road?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, that's what we're hoping for. So they have some experience on justice centers. They have Kitchell, who's under them, who has significant justice center experience, plus this programmer that would come in. I mean, that's another idea as to why we have the owner's rep is, they can be the outside force that says, we're giving you unbiased data. Here's what we're seeing out there. And they can not necessarily be the bad guys, but explain why they're recommending what they're recommending. Now, do they have the final say? I mean, they can't make us do something or make the committee vote a certain way, but they can present all the data.
Sure.
And that's what we're hopeful, that we lead a data-driven process that looks at where the justice system is going, what other cities are, what other counties are doing, and they can bring that information to the table, and hopefully that makes informed decisions.
Right.
And if the committee can see, that it makes sense as to where we're going, we're hoping that, everybody will go in that direction. There's always going to be a couple people that probably won't go along, which is why a bigger committee at least helps us well, while there's still a couple that might not go with it. If the majority feels it's the right move, we can still keep going, and we're not at a stalemate.
Okay, good to know that. Thanks.
Yeah, and once again, any expenditures are ultimately coming back before this council also.
Right. Are these meetings going to be open to the public? I don't see why they wouldn't be.
Right. I mean, the intent is to keep this open, and it's the largest significant capital expenditure for Cuyahoga County, I think, at least in my lifetime. This is the busiest public facility, I believe, in the county outside of the airport, possibly. So the intent is we're going to have meetings, hopefully every 2 to 3 weeks, set scheduled meetings for the stakeholders. I'm sure there will be certain information that has to be somewhat kind of discussed, maybe in a confidential setting, but
What would that be?
Security.
I mean, we're not purchasing land or
sure, it could be security issues
for the committee?
for the committee itself, but.
I mean, certain plans they might present could talk about how security is done in a building, what
I
to
think
do.
that's way down the line.
Just in terms of how much space is needed and because of what they're doing or what they're looking. I mean, again, just parking and facilities like that. There could be some sensitive
Okay.
topics, but
I'm just looking at the sensitivity of the public being able to view this. Because we weren't generally responsible for the Juvenile Justice Center, but we saw the mess that was and turned out to be, and the problems that exist now, and that's avoidable. But once again, you're talking about letting the wrong people make decisions here. In my opinion, I think you have the courts, prosecutor, the sheriff, the administration, and the council. With Cleveland, if we get an agreement with Cleveland, I really don't want anybody in the door that's not gonna, in the end, agree. They're gonna have to be in or out. So that's 6. You have any more than 6, and I know that's an even number, you are asking for trouble. And I can't think of another stakeholder that's more important than those 6. Until you go to, maybe I'm forgetting somebody, but
Right. It's a large group, obviously, and
well,
we're
you're
trying to
talking as
get
though
it-
this group is formulated. Could you tell me who's on it?
Who's on it?
Well, you're saying
Like
it's a
those-
large group.
Well, it's really the draft version of it.
Well,
Like I said,
give me the draft version. Who's on it?
So, the prosecutor's office.
Okay.
The Common Pleas Court, which has a significant amount of space and different
Right.
functions going on.
Sure.
And they may have 2 representatives.
No, they don't need 2. They get 1.
Um,
The sheriff's got the most space and he gets 1.
The sheriff's office.
Okay.
Actually, we were looking for the corrections, head of corrections and the sheriff.
Well,
to both
that's the sheriff's
participate in
job.
it.
See, this is where, I'm going to stop now because I'm telling you, mark it down this day, this is going to turn into a nightmare. When everybody gets invited to the party, the neighborhood falls apart. This is the same thing that happened at Juvenile, and then that morphed into things that weren't good for the people of Cuyahoga County that foot the bill. This isn't brain surgery. This certainly isn't brain surgery. And like I said, I go back to the federal government. No problems, no cost problems, One person makes the decision. And everybody can hate that person, but guess what? It gets done. But that's not going to happen here. Okay, anything further? Not picking on you, but
That's all right,
I
that's
can't
all right.
wait, I can't wait till my neighbor's invited to be a member of this committee.
One other thing, when we started the process back in the summer, Nate Kelly was taking the lead for the administration. The Department of Public Works is taking the lead on this. Nicole is going to be the head programmer for this, and she'll be working closely with PMC. So I just want you to be aware if you've got any questions in regards to it that coming through us.
Okay, and what would you like us to do with this?
The hope is that we may be able to put it on second reading suspension, but we can understand if the council would prefer to go 3 full readings.
After our first reading, or you want to go to a second reading?
Second reading suspension. You've done first last week, right?
Oh, this came back? No, this is first reading.
It's first reading.
First?
Right, he's asking for it to be voted on under suspension at the council meeting.
Right, okay. Is everyone okay with that? We're okay with that? All right. If everyone's okay, I'll take a motion for Resolution 2018-0007 for first reading under emergency suspension at the next council meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. Any further questions? This is a leap of faith by this committee. I'm just telling you, that gray hair is going to get grayer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, sir. Good luck. Miscellaneous business? Other public comment?
Yes, Reverend Pinckney.
Where there is no vision, the people perish. And on this side of the desk, chairman and committee members and people, others in the room, I wouldn't have a problem with the money, 800,000 or whatever, if there's responsible people. And we must consider the factors of racism and other barriers that are going to exist in that process and in the project. But where there is no vision, the people do perish. And the one thing you are leaving out is someone who would address the spiritual needs of the people that are affected by this process on your board, on your committee. I said that to say this too. Chairman, I heard you make the comment about the federal government. I concur with you on that. And that's why the Apostle Paul, he was an apostle, and he was also one of the people who was part of the Sanhedrin Council, and those were the people who actually thought they had killed Jesus because he knew the law. But he also became one of the most popular apostles, wrote the most books, and had to combine the law with the word. And you have a great challenge before you. And I've entered into that world. As you know, I ran for president 3 times. Well, I've actually stepped into the ring now to draft legislation on a federal level because I concur with you 100% that it is a very convoluted process right now. And as much as I disagree with many of the decisions Mr. Trump may make or Mr. Obama or whoever has been in there, you're right that one thing does make a difference on how all these other pieces pull together. And what can be done by the power of one makes all the difference. And I came this afternoon to share with you too, that in my putting my hat in the ring for running for United States House of Representatives for the 11th District, for the representing the state of Ohio, one of my pivotal pieces and concerns in public safety and justice affairs is domestic violence. And it impacts everyone's life. And after the Women's March on Saturday, this coming Saturday on the 20th, I'm having a domestic violence event at my church. And I had one of the people in the community, one of the community leaders got upset with me because they don't want to talk about domestic violence. They felt like my being a preacher or even a community leader, that's not my business. Well, if the church remains silent, then we don't have anything. As you build this new justice system and this new justice center process, that's why many of the people are actually in there. And one of my concerns too, I heard them speaking about the juvenile process. Would you please also consider how many people are damaged as a result of correction officers' abuse too? Rehabilitation and correction does not give COs or anyone else the right to be violent. And I seek peace, and I pursue it at all times.
Thank you.
And I don't know what it's gonna take, because I still do need some assistance with these babies. I don't want them in what you're building.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm gonna leave you my other
Have a good-
information for what we're doing
If you give it to
with your
Janine.
clerk.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Anything?
Okay, wow, big step today, huh? Justice Center.